We all have banks or agents of banks or however they want to call it, call us up and ask if we want personal loans. So this is something that we all of us face in common, and nobody remembers where they got our data from, or nobody has a track of it. So if I were to inform a bank about not processing my data, don't call me back. Now, I don't remember a case where we have stopped receiving calls.
Exactly.
We still do. Now, this is going to be a problem because one of the obligations under the Act is that when consent is revoked or consent is withdrawn, that data must be erased and it should be stopped. The processing must be stopped. We should not handle the data henceforth unless there is a necessity to retain the data.
Today's episode is proudly brought to you by Effortless. Effortless is the ultimate solution for startups and SMBs seeking seamless money management and compliance handling, e-invoicing and e-waybill generation with just a couple of clicks, slashing collection efforts by a staggering 90% through the magic of automated follow-ups, snapping a quick photo of your bill to instantly log expenses. With Effortless, you get the power of a consolidated bank account view, seeing both business and personal accounts seamlessly integrated. With Effortless, making UPI like payments is a breeze. Effortless keeps you on track, ensuring your finances and compliance are always in top shape. Effortless wasn't just created by anyone. It was crafted by chartered accountant turned entrepreneurs who understand the pulse of startups and SMBs. Visit www.goeffortless.ai and embark on a journey that will redefine the way you do business. Effortless, because managing a business should be anything but a hassle. Hi, Bharath and Madhura. Thanks a lot for accepting my invitation to talk in the ContraMinds podcast. It's an absolute privilege to talk to you, and thanks for taking time and talking to us.
A very good evening, Swami. It's an absolute pleasure and honor joining you here. Knowing who all have preceded us and who have spent considerable time with you, it's absolute pleasure and honor to come and share our thoughts, experience, and knowledge on data protection tonight.
Fantastic. So, Bharat, let me dive into the subject straight away. I think we are going through a very critical phase in the privacy legislation that's happening in India, and this whole DPDPA Act is really something that has taken a lot of effort, and I'm sure a lot of effort has gone into designing this very important act. So if you can spend some time giving me a perspective on how this will impact business and what really are some of the key tenets of this act, that will be a good starting point for our conversation.
Oh, absolutely. So, firstly, before we get into protection of data, we need to understand the privacy side, or what is data, what is personal data, what is digitized personal data. There are basically three or four layers to it. Data is information. Information means, and personal data means information about a particular person. So if Swami, I'm speaking to you, I know you are Swami, you are in Bombay, you are a male, you are probably a Hindu by choice of religion. We don't know what you practice, but I'm presuming with your name. And you will have your date of birth, your medical records, your financial uh, status insofar as your banking records. So, any data which is able to personally identify you and which are personal to you would be the personal data of which you are the primary owner, or you are the principal person for your own personal data.
Mhm.
Now, this data over the years, when say 40, 50 years back, when we all went to school, would have been on a register, a school register. That's the start. I mean, it would be in a corporation register where we get a birth certificate. And
True.
then it will be taken, that birth certificate will then get translated into a school joining program
Mm.
where the school will ask, show me the birth certificate so that I know you are eligible and you are old enough to join school. And that data gets translated into college. With from college, you will have a college degree. From there, you will open bank accounts. From bank accounts, and then you will have your own email addresses. You have, and then you go to a doctor down your road. He might be having a scribbling pad, or he might have, or he or she might have a separate docket called Swami, and then it might have your medical records from your class 2 to class, all the way up until you are currently hale and healthy. So there are a variety of data. There
Mhm.
is variety of personal data. Not all data pertaining to you is personal data.
Mm.
There might be publicly available data as well, but we'll come to that later. And then these are in different modes or medium. It can be in physical form, or it can get digitized and become digital personal data. When you look at the Indian history, we've been very, very open about a lot of things. I mean, no one was really bothered about privacy. Of
Mhm.
course, privacy law has been primitive, not been enforced the way it would in Western world. I'm going on a long route here, but I will probably try to summarize it. But when you look at cultural differences, Indians have been very open about their data.
Mm.
They don't really care about their data. When you go to the West, even their envelopes which come home will be put through a shredder, but we don't.
Mm.
Having said that, in 2000s was the first time when there was a need felt to have data protection and privacy protection. That there is a rich history on why it came about to be formed, but 2006 statute never made it to becoming a law. I mean, it was more of a bill and it never became an act.
Mhm.
But eventually, earlier this year, we have the government which has passed in both the houses a digital data protection law. So DPDPA is
Mhm.
going to protect personal data which is digitized. Therefore, we need to have an act which will protect individuals, which will monitor and also guide corporations, individuals, organizations on how this personal data will be stored, saved, processed, and who is going to monitor all these things. There would be probably a government run tribunal. And last but not the least, the most important key part is the consent.
Mm.
I, as a personal data, my personal data, or you as with your personal data, need to consent where and how this data has to be, personal data has to be used. So they are bringing in very many players in this whole management of personal data. But as a starter, I just wanted to give a brief history on where we were and where we are. But of course, we will go into the nitty gritties eventually.
Fantastic. I think it always makes sense, Bharat, to get the perspective first, because half the time we get into the details without having the perspective. So it's great that you gave us the perspective. But one question I have is, if I were a customer and if I were a business, how is my life going to change with this DPDPA, right? Which is, there's going to be a whole host of things that are going to change for me as a customer. And what is it going to be for the business?
Well, 5 years back, if I would have told you that you could spend months together without going to an ATM or a bank without cash, no one would have believed us.
Mm.
The way 3G became 5G, the digital transactions came about to be done. NEFT and online transfers from 2 hour window to 6 hour window to 12 hour window to 24 hour windows have come. The national uh, at the national level, there have been a lot of changes where UPI payments have been enabled. Um, 10 days back, when we had the Ganesh or Vinayak Chaturthi, I tried going to this market, and I went with the 500 rupee note, believing that they won't have digital money. And they said, we don't have chutta, we don't have change for you, so please pay me by Paytm or Google, GPay, of products worth 80 rupees and 100 rupees. Uh, so that's the transformation we are looking at even in data, in the sense, uh, day in, day out, we get pushed in by SMS, WhatsApp, calls, which have been eating into our valuable productive time. Unsolicited calls, targeted calls, even the social media. I don't want to take famous names, uh, where they know that you are in Bombay, you are in Vashi, you are looking out for an apartment which is 3 crores, and then there will be advertisements targeting you. And those would be the transformational daily change which, as an individual, I would have.
Mhm.
From a marketing perspective, it will be much more selective. You know who is really interested in buying an apartment in Vashi for 3 crores, and you will not be going and targeting 20,000 persons. You will be targeting 200 persons who have given consent.
Mhm.
So your budgets would possibly get lesser, and your target will be more focused. That's my high take on it. But only time and tide will say as to how, from an individual perspective, from a uh, marketing company perspective or a targeting company perspective, life would be different. But I would say there would be more productivity. There would be less cost to the company.
Okay. So, Madhura, there are multiple, stakeholders in this act that that's defined, right? So, there's somebody called a data fiduciary. There is somebody called a consent manager. So, can you walk us through who is a consent manager, who is a data fiduciary, and can you give us some examples of how, if I were a bank or if I were a telco, uh, how should the whole world of managing personal data change for me as a business?
Um, Let me speak from both perspectives, from the individual's perspective and from the business perspective. So, first, starting with who all of us individually are. First change that, as Bharat was saying, the first change that this law is going to bring is that at every instance where our data is being collected, we'll be given a notice. Each individual will be given a notice of what are the requirements, and we'll also be expected to give consent. So now this means that there are going to be numerous organizations coming and asking me for consent. And on a daily basis, we also give our information to multiple different businesses for the different transactions, right? So in order to manage all of these, it is essential for even individuals to have some system to manage and organize the kind of consent that I'm giving to different persons. Say, for example, let's take in if I am located in Chennai and if I were to move to Bangalore or Mumbai, then all the other local providers, I might not be interested in continuing in them continuing processing my data. And there
Mm.
should be some mass. I should also be enabled to communicate with all these local vendors, maybe my departmental store, maybe the local real estate agent, banks, and tell them to stop processing my data because I'm moving to a different location, or to give a change in address. All of this is going to be difficult to make it. Rather than to say it's going to be difficult, uh, understanding that it might be difficult, the government has brought in the ideology of consent manager, and this takes this amongst everything that the law is speaking of. The consent manager concept has gotten a lot of attention because it's very new.
Mm.
And most other laws, around 120 other countries across the globe have data protection laws, but consent manager is a law that is coming, is a concept that has come new in India.
Okay.
The law itself has recognized such a concept, and this the primary objective is to help people understand. We should understand that from the Indian perspective, this is a large nation, very mixed population. We are still a developing country, and there is a bunch of the population is divided by literacy, ability, language, and a number of other mechanisms, or a number of other factors, I can say. So, in such situations, it's also essential that it is easier for the individuals to manage the consent, and that's the birth of the concept of consent managers. This is going to be an entirely new kind of entities that are brought into picture to assist and aid the individuals in managing their consent. Um, for now, for understanding purposes, let's take the example of each individual engaging an consent manager, a separate entity, who will collect and moderate and manage the consent that I give to various businesses. But what will these entities do? How will they be structured? For our easy understanding purposes, let's just think of it as another app that we'll have in our phones, through which we'll give data and through which we'll manage data. It is expected that the entire ideology of consent managers can come up like a centrally organized situation, like how UPI works, or through different technologies such as APIs, which will interact with other vendors and manage consent. So that's
Okay.
the entire idea of consent management, which is an entirely new concept that is being brought into recognized by a law as such. And looking at the lead that we took in terms of API, this can also be something that other countries may in future borrow from us. Uh, and apart from consent managers, we also have other actors or players in the act. And one of them, which is you mentioned, is the data fiduciary. So, in simple terms, to call out the that refers to the individuals as data principals, because you own the data and the data is specifically yours. And there's a specific term, data fiduciary, given to businesses that work on that data. So I'm using the word businesses for convenience, but whenever I use that, I also refer to organizations that can operate out of a non-profit motive, such as educational institutions or non-governmental institutions, or even the government per se. So because data fiduciary is any organization, any entity that is handling some personal data.
Okay.
So for their operations or for their business. That means every other organization in India, irrespective of their industry or irrespective of their scale of business, is working on some amount of personal data. Because without personal data, the e-commerce delivery that we use, they'll not be able to deliver it to our space.
Correct.
All the bills will not get delivered. And without personal data, there's no end customer, there's no connection at all. Even in manufacturing industry, there is, for communication purposes, or even in B2B, there is some amount of personal data involved. So
Perfect.
this means not just IT companies, not just social medias, but every other brick and mortar store that we in on a daily basis operate with, they'll also fall under the act, and they are the data fiduciaries. When you're processing the data for your own purposes, for your business, to communicate with your customers, then you're a data fiduciary. And one way this law differs from the other laws on privacy across the globe is, in general, to describe a business that's operating on personal data, the word data controller is being used, because that way it refers to the entity that is controlling the means of processing and the purposes of processing, the entity that is deciding the means and purposes. But this act calls it as the data fiduciary, giving significance to the term fiduciary, because on a trust basis is that we are giving our data to some entity. To emphasize on that trust basis is the reason the act is terming the entities as data fiduciaries. When an entity is operating on personal data, is handling a large amount of personal data or very sensitive personal data, then that entity can fall under the category of something called the significant data fiduciary, which will have higher obligations and more cost consuming obligations than what is generally data fiduciary might have. So there are two layers. One would be the significant data fiduciary and then the significant data fiduciary.
Okay.
And there's another concept called the data processor. So data processors will mostly be subcontractors of data fiduciaries to whom a data an entity has given the data and instructed on what processing should be operated or what how the data should be handled. So data processors are, if we are a data fiduciary, all our vendors become the data processors, and we might on a daily basis think that maybe we're not using any vendors, but if we are handling data digitally, it's possible that we are using a lot of softwares for handling them, and all of these softwares also become our data fiduciaries. All other processing outsourced apart from the company, they are data
So
processors.
a typical BPO would become a data processor, is what you are saying,
Right.
correct?
Precisely. BPOs would not only BPOs, most other B2B companies will also fall under the category of data process for that amount of data that they are handling. Say
Okay.
they're sending an email, the mailing system is a data processor, because what if I am sending an email from my company to a customer, I'm expecting the email carrier to only act on whatever instructions that I have given. I'm not expecting them to do anything. If I'm sending an email, it doesn't allow the mail carrier to take that data and use it for any other purposes or for their own purposes. They are strictly acting under the instructions. I have employed them or I have engaged with them only to act on the instructions that I have given. So that likewise, likewise, if a company is using a processor, then the processor is required to only act on the instructions of the company. All the vendors and subcontractors will typically fall under this category.
Okay, great. So somewhere I read that yeah, all businesses are coming under this law, or are there different timelines that have been given? For example, if I'm an MSME, I may not be digitally compliant, or I may not have the maturity to become as the act wants. So, or startups. So, is there a difference in the kinds of businesses that this act gives flexibility to comply with this law?
To answer, yes, I'm also glad about posting that this law recognizes the difference in the Indian landscape and the different how it can be difficult for certain businesses to comply with obligations. So one main key aspect is that this law has not come into effect till date. It has been announced. We have a gazetted copy of the act. It has been notified and enacted, but it's not brought into effect yet. What the government has said is that different portions of the act can come into effect on different dates as well.
Mm.
This can be that major operators like social media, like other entities that deal with a lot of personal information, will be required to comply with the act first, and late and on and subsequent basis, other smaller businesses will be brought within the compliance requirements. And also to note, this act also has certain exceptions for startups,
Mm.
for smaller companies, wherein they'll be accepted not from the entire application of the act, but from certain obligations. Startups can have an exceptions once it is being notified by the government. There is a placeholder, or there is a provision that may allow startups to be exempted from certain provisions.
Okay.
And as I was saying, it is already layered to some extent. So we have the data fiduciary, which will be all entities, and entities processing large amount of data, or the scope of processing is very high, or they handle very sensitive data. They can, like banks, they will fall under the significant data fiduciary category, who will have higher obligations. So the timeline is also can be different. The scope of obligations can also be different.
Are there any certifications, or like a badge that gives me as a business to say that I'm 100% compliant with this act? Is there anything like that that's there right now?
If there is anything as such, that will be a great relief to most organizations. But we should currently also understand that this law is something that businesses should comply on a daily basis.
Hmm.
It's not. just one registration or one certification and hey, I am compliant. So this is more on a practical and an implementation basis. So currently under the law we don't have any certification procedure as such,
Mhm.
but any kind of information security practices or certifications, such as the ISO 27001 or the 20, which
Yeah,
which is around information security management systems, or the ISO 27701, which is more related to privacy, because it revolves around the privacy information management systems, personal
correct.
information management systems.
And
So
cyber
these
security,
certifications
right?
can be helpful.
And cyber security, right? The
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity measures can be helpful. The law doesn't call out on any of the certifications that I'm speaking of, but
Mhm.
on a practical and implementation basis, moving towards any of these security certifications can be very helpful, because although we call this a privacy legislation, the implementing leg, one of the implementing legs is security, cybersecurity. So
Okay.
to enhance protection, it would be suggestible to have these certifications or any other certifications recognized globally. But all of these are not what the law calls out. On a practical basis, it can be helpful.
Okay, great.
So ISO 27001 and
Mhm.
27701
Mm.
both are for information security and privacy information management system.
Okay.
Hence, so while the first one is how you protect data inside your organization, and second one is a very advanced one.
Mhm.
Both of them normally have a gestation period of 6 months to 10 months to 1 year for study of your practices internally, and how you are logging in movement of data within your organization. And after the end of 6 months to 10 months, depending on when you think you are ready for the audit, ISO officials come sit with you for a few days. They audit your systems for about how long ever it takes. And if you pass, of course, an ISO certification is given. But as rightly said, the DPDPA Act is nothing to do with ISO certification. It does not require your organization to be certified. If it's only for the comfort level of your badge of quality in which
Mm.
you are managing data and information privacy as well.
Okay. Okay. So, so
But also
one,
considering it might not be, economically feasible for all organizations to go for an ISO certification.
exactly,
They
exactly.
can be very well governed within internal practices and implementation of certain other
Yeah,
requirements. It might
I,
not be.
I was checking, it takes about 9 to 15 lakhs, anywhere between 9 and 15 lakhs to get it.
Exactly. No, which is the next point, Bharat, I'm coming to, which is, is this kind of a law, if I'm already, I'm compliant with the international privacy laws, does it require me to, get some waiver, or do I need to comply with the Indian jurisdiction? So is there something that it says, so I may be GDPR compliant? So is the so how does that work?
So the standards are so different. The expectations are so different. In some ways, GDPR has got higher standards. In some ways, Indian DPDPA has got higher standards.
Mm.
What I mean by that is the way in which they look at the controller, what we
Mm.
call it as the fiduciary, is different. There is no concept of a constant manager in GDPR at all. I think that would be a game changer in India.
Okay.
What I mean by that is to put it in a very different perspective, but on a relatable perspective. Affordable Indians are so used to having a chauffeur
Mm.
or a person who will come and clean the house on a daily basis, or a runner, an errand person who will go shopping for you, or a concierge, personal concierge. We can call them by different names, but I don't want to
Mm.
term them differently. But the West doesn't have that. I mean, you go to a shopping mall, in India, you have an automated parking system.
Hmm.
But for getting the parking ticket out, you have a man or a woman pushing the button for you and giving the ticket out, which you can do it on your own,
Correct.
right? In a way, you can technically have a consent management on your own, but still in India, they deemed it fit that you need a consent manager for different perspectives, probably because an individual, not all individuals would know how to do that, or you can call it as a concierge desk. So there's no one standard. There is not one level of quality of data protection. Yes, GDPR is ahead of time.
Mhm.
When it say ahead of time, they are ahead of us. They were implemented first. I won't say they are of higher quality or higher standard, but it's not the same yardstick.
Okay.
It's like taxation law. You have a different set of tax in EU, different set of tax in India. If you're compliant in EU, you need not be compliant in India, right? So if you have a organization which has a foot in EU and foot in India, you need to be compliant of tax laws in both countries or
Hmm.
both jurisdictions. Similarly, even for data protection, you need to be compliant, though of different set of expectations and standards in each of the two jurisdictions.
So, if I were an organization, the law is still not in force. How do I prepare myself? Because somewhere I read that law firms like yours are helping in gap analysis, looking at where how the data is being stored, how the data flows are. So, what are the things that are being done? And if I'm an organization wanting to be prepared for this change that's going to happen, what are the things I should be doing, Madhura?
So, first to start out with, there should be an overall understanding of the data that we process.
Mhm.
Because this law, as such, the requirement as such, is very new to India. And privacy, as Bharath was saying in the starting of the presentation of the session, uh, privacy as such is a concept that we are slowly moving towards. Not all Indians understand the concept of privacy.
Yeah.
Till date, Big Boss has been a show that's on the top watch. So this is going to take time for everybody to understand the privacy requirements, but we are slowly moving towards there. Let's think of the number of consumers who are starting to purchase mobile devices that project privacy as their key USP. So we are moving slightly closer to the requirement, to being more concerned of privacy. With that, when we speak of obligations from a company's perspective, it's first important to understand what data we process, who do we have it shared with, and what are the purposes that we use it for. Where does this data get stored? When we work with organizations, most organizations might not know where their data centers are.
Correct.
Is it in a different country? It might be in US because you have worked with any vendor who has got you a data space in US. And on the go of everyday's operations, we sometimes don't have a track of where and all our data goes.
Hmm.
Maybe it's an organization that has bring your own device policies, or it's just that people use their own systems, and it might be a lot of data might be lying in the laptops of employees who have even left the organizations. We don't have a track of it. So first, to understand where the data is, wherever it goes, and this is going to be the first step and the most critical step that any organization is taking. We call it the data mapping, understanding the movement of data. And it's a little tricky also because data, when it moves, it leaves very less trails,
Hmm.
intangible assets. So we're not able to clearly track where and all the data is moving and who has access to it. Or do multiple people have access to it from the same ID? In such cases, how do we understand who looking at what data and using it for what purposes? It's very usual for us to call a customer from our personal mobile numbers to get some update. And all of this is going to be tricky because when such they have the retain the customers' numbers as well as they do that. So first is to understand the data processing of how we handle the data.
Hmm.
And when we say data mapping, We refer to five main questions, like I was saying, to summarize.
Okay.
One
Okay.
is, what data do we process?
Mm-hmm.
Where is the data located? What are the purposes that is it is being used for? Who has access? And when do we delete the data? And the last question gets trickier because in most instances we forget that data needs to be deleted. Only when we run out of storage we think of deleting the data. That's that's the general conversion. So it's important that we focus on all these five and understand the entire data mapping processes. And it's important for different stakeholders from different teams of an organization to sit together and understand, because it's not going to be possible for one employee to just look at and say, oh, this is what we, maybe the way the HR is processing the data can be very different from what the sales is. Each department can be using their own softwares, not something centralized. They'll be using different tools to process data. So it's essential to first understand the data mapping process. And how privacy professionals and law firms like us help in doing it is through our experience in working with organizations across industries, because what learning from one helps another. So that's where our key role goes in helping companies understand, giving a full set of questions. Have you done this? Have you done this? Do you process data? I mean, do you process employee data? Where is it that is being stored? If you're having an insurance company, what is the data? And for employee insurance, what is the data that we give them? And what are the verticals in which data can be exchanged? This is something that can come from experience, or and an entire set of analysis that we do with the data. And that's where we are trying to help companies in understanding.
So that's fantastic. So therefore, as a law firm, you are actually having a practice which is really around going to organizations and saying, hey, we can help you with the data mapping, and therefore understanding the legal and the compliance requirements of organizations and where do they stand today. And that's really the first step that you believe organizations should start doing. Is that right, Bharat? Would that be the first step to take?
Absolutely. We call it the audit. It's like uh, looking back into home. It's like a house audit. Uh, for the first time, you will start understanding whose data do we have, why do we have it, where is it, as Madhu was mentioning. It's an introspective question.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you know what you have,
Mm.
you don't know what you have to do.
Mm.
So the first step would be to do an introspection, what we call it as an audit. And then it's not only just a law firm which will be important to be embracing or hand-holding any of the organizations. There'll be at least I'm visualizing 10 other players who will come to stitch this statute together.
Mm.
Um, to make it work. When I say to make it work, for an UPI to work, you need to have a Google, you need to have a two banks, as in my bank, your bank, to send monies through Google Pay, and then you have, apart from the bankers, you need to have another layer of a third party vendor
Mm.
who will check if my PIN verifies and opens my bank account, and then the it'll come and tap into knock your bank account for you to accept. So without you knowing, the API UPI transactions which are happening right now have at least 10 players for one transaction to go.
Mm.
And that's how we would have even data protection. Not one person is enough, but as a starter, let's pause, let's see what we have, let's see what we should do. And teams like ours would possibly help you go through your own itemized um, subject matters, and then help you be prepared for the times to come. Because when it comes, there are penalties, there are not only just cost implication, there might be sanctions as well, which we need to be aware of. The bigger the company you are, The bigger the sanctions are, I'm told that it runs into several crores. The top penalty is about 250 crores.
Mm.
So, and 250 crores might not be very much for a very, very large corporation, but 250 crores is a big money as a penalty.
Yeah.
It's not a tax liability you are paying. It's not that you are challenging a tax liability, but it's a penalty of 250 crores for non-compliance of Data Protection Act.
Mm.
Uh, when I say 250 crores, that's the top end. Right? You
Absolutely.
can start with 2 crores, 5 crores, 10 crores, and it can go anywhere up. But what we are doing right now is firstly talk about it. Secondly, we are having uh, systems in place to discuss with and draw up a map, conduct those audits, and then give them reports of the audits to see where they are. We don't know the gaps because we still don't know what the need is, right? So we can possibly come out with a report of audit on the data which they have, and then say these are the portions of DPDPA which would be applicable for you, and let's wait for the rules and the regulations and the notifications to come, because we are also expecting at least 15 to 20 different sets of rules and notifications to support the main statute.
Okay. So which clearly means that, so if I were to say I want to get into that journey as an organization, uh, what is the kind of Madhu? What's the kind of timeline that I should prepare myself for? Say, is it a 3 month effort? Is it a 6 month effort? Because when do you think, in I'm not asking you to make a guess, but assuming that we are going to be ready in a year's time, or a 12 months time, or an 18 months time, for this to actually become a come into practice as an organization. How long does it take for me to do the steps that you were talking about? And who are the stakeholders that the organization should bring together to get this into some shape?
The timeline for implementing all of this is going to mainly depend on how prepared you are for learning, for complying with this. Let's take the example of somebody already knowing to drive a car.
Hmm.
To drive a different car is going to take a lesser amount of time, but to learn from scratch is going to, because maybe the controls are a little different, the headlight is on the left and not the right, and very simple changes. Like, so, similarly, if you had been compliant with any data protection law of a different country, it's going to be a little simpler, because this data mapping that we were speaking of would have already been done. Certain procedures would have been already implemented. If the company had an ISO 27001 or 27701, certain preliminary measures would have been already covered. But if we were to start afresh, then that's going to take some amount of time. The timelines will totally depend upon uh, the scale of operations of a business, the amount of data they process, and the kind of controls that they already have in place.
So if I were to break it down and then say, for for the benefit of the audience, if I were to say I'm a fairly immature business to a mature business to a mid scale mature business, if I were to look at it, because in India you even get a probably a 20 million, $50 million company which could be not digitally mature, right? So therefore, given that as an extent, if you say I want to engage a law firm, a set of IT professionals, all of you coming together to do the data mapping exercise, typically, would you say, give yourself about, if I'm immature in terms of digital maturity and where my data is, not in terms of the business that you are doing. Okay. Uh, would you say give yourself 6 months, 9 months? Because anyway, ISO 27001, like what Bharath was saying, was a 6 to 9 month exercise, right? So therefore, that's the kind of timeline you are saying. Start to prepare now rather than sprint in the last minute. That's what you are saying, right?
That's definitely true, because if we were to wait for the government to give the deadlines, we'd all be rushing up towards compliance, and that's going to create a lot of bottleneck,
Hmm.
because the law. in operation is going to do a lot with how the practices and the methods in which the companies are going to implement it. There's a large amount of time that we'll have to spend in understanding the data that we process. There's a substantial amount of time that we'll have to spend in training the concerned individuals, training our employees on what to do and what not to do. And we have to give this time. And when we start ahead, we also stay ahead of the curve, and we know, and it's not going to cause much chaos, or it's not going to impact the business running when the compliance deadline come into play. We can focus on it on a slow and steady manner, and that's the reason we are emphasizing on companies moving towards compliance on the go. And we also know that now the act has come in, the rules or the more procedural aspects are yet to come in. This also gives us a space to set the foundation right so that we can in future build on it.
Okay. And from your experience, what are the kind of challenges you are seeing for companies which are walking this path today? I'm sure you're working with. I know you guys work with a lot of startups, with a lot of companies. So typically, what kind of challenges are you seeing, and how do I overcome these challenges? If you were to give me a broad perspective of how do you see the challenges, and how do they what do you recommend as overcoming the challenges?
So, a variety of them. I'll obviously let Madhu also chip in. Um, for example, if I'm a fintech company or if I'm a travel company, let's take a travel company. Ideal. I won't take names, but we are
Sure.
advising them right now. Now, they want to create their own mobile app so that clients can, so they have a fleet of 500, 600 cars, and they want the clients to come and book where they have to be picked. So they help with the large um, corporations who have multiple locations, multiple officers. So they have a centralized way of booking cars. And the same car company has to speak to Google Maps, has to collect data from the company and their officer who has to be picked up. So they know the officer's mobile number, whether it's a he or a she, their address, and their drop address.
Mm,
So some parts of this is personal data,
mm,
the home address or probably the drop address.
mm,
So they are not a software company.
mm,
They have outsourced the creation of the software to a third party
mm,
who's running the software for them and maintaining it as well for them. So if you look at the flow of data, the data goes from the individual. It's always from the individual. Personal data means data is owned by an individual
mm,
because it belongs to or it relates to an individual. From the individual, it will go to the company, say Kriya Law. Kriya Law knows that Bharath has to go to the airport at 5 a.m. to catch a 7 a.m. flight. So Kriya Law will tell that company, please go and pick up Bharath from such a place and drop him at such a place.
mm,
So from individual to my company, from my company to the travel company to the software company,
mm,
which is running the travel company's software platform. And for all you know, that software company might have their data servers located in Australia,
mm,
maintained by an Australian company. So I'm just giving you in a matter of 15 minutes,
mm,
8 persons have already touched your data without you knowing where it has gone, how it has gone.
mm,
Um, to summarize it, the the whether you are a travel company or a food company or a departmental store or a doctor
mm,
who's looking at who's building their own softwares for meeting clients like this.
mm,
And there are third party softwares which are giving doctors and patient video interactions,
mm,
and the data is inputted through the doctor appointment software, like a company like Practo, whoever it is. So every person, whether you are a doctor, fintech company, travel company, departmental store, food store, restaurant, everyone needs to understand that they are collecting data, whether they like it or not. Or even my newspaper person has a WhatsApp business account, and he sends me WhatsApp business account generated invoices for $800 for the 3 newspapers I generate. So, long story short, everyone is going to be affected. Everyone needs to know about data. How we want to do it is we need to start at home. So I'm sorry, Madhura, I just wanted to give a context over it before you want to answer his actual question.
I think the context setting is brilliant, Bharat, because I think the context setting, if I were an audience listening to this, it just tells me the depth that I need to get in. It tells me how I need to do. Therefore, the traditional methods of how I did store my data, how I did it, how I did my marketing, how I process my insurance, how I process my, admin. Everything is going to change because you can actually complain to the data protection board. Is something that I'm seeing, right? So therefore, can you just walk us through? I believe there's going to be a data protection board, and like a RERA, you could actually go there and say, hey, these guys have reached out to me without my consent, and that's really where the litigations or the complaints will start, right? That's the way, Madhu, it's going to work, right?
Precisely, and that's going to bring that's the reason I guess we all of us are speaking about this data protection law, because we know that there's going to be a board that is going to listen to complaints.
Mm.
That is what was not there earlier. We also had many data protection related obligations under the earlier Information Technology Act and the rules made under the act, but now we have a concrete system that would hear and listen to complaints from individuals, and that is another aspect that's making this law a lot more serious.
Mm.
Now, one of the main challenges that the companies might face is, first, let's look at a little into the prime obligation of the law. The law says that you have to collect consent and provide a notice to individuals in English and all the 28 official languages. That's going to be a trouble itself. But still, there should be a notice, and this notice should say what data you're handling, who is it that you're sharing with, and what are the purposes that you're using it for. To say what you're doing, you should first know what you're doing, and
Yeah.
that's where the entire data mapping processes come in. To identify that is going to be the first challenge, because currently most of our organizations or entities in India are not mature or organized in terms of their data handling practices.
Yeah.
And now they'll have to sit together, understand what different teams are doing, and can come off as a shock to most managements on what different teams are doing with the data. So that knowing the data and this entire work is going to be the first challenge. The second challenge is that internally in each of the organizations, there should be employees or departments or mechanisms in place that is going to address grievances before the grievance can go to the data protection board.
Okay.
So if I have a trouble with any company processing my data, say for example, we all have banks or agents of banks or however they want to call it, call us up and ask if we want personal loans. So this is something that we all of us face in common, and nobody remembers where they got our data from, or nobody has a track of it. So if I were to inform a bank about not processing my data, don't call me back. Now, I don't remember a case where we have stopped receiving calls.
Exactly.
We still do. Now, this is going to be a problem, because one of the obligations under the Act is that when consent is revoked or consent is withdrawn, that data must be erased and it should be stopped. The processing must be stopped. You should not handle the data henceforth unless there is a necessity to retain the data.
Exactly.
Now, there should be people in the organization who are going to listen to these complaints and resolve them. Or if I want to change my phone number or an email ID, if people have switched from organizations to different organizations and they do not want to be communicated in the previous channels of communication, phone number or email ID or whatsoever, all these grievances should be redressed at company level. Because the law says an individual should first go and approach the data fiduciary, the company or the entity, and only then can they go and approach the board. So that individuals are not going to directly walk into the board, it's going to come to the company first. And the company is also given a chance to address the grievance. But what if we have an email and we don't know how exactly to do? Or what if there is a complaint that is being received and individuals are not acting upon, I mean, the employees are not acting upon it, there should be set processes to hear grievances, and people within the organization or externally engaged individuals must be utilized to handle the grievance redressals, because with the act and with the awareness that people in general have, before we didn't know that we can withdraw consent, now we know. And there's going to be a large amount of people making requests. There should be proper processes within organizations to handle them as well. It can also be externally outsourced to privacy professionals, law firms, or however, information security professionals who are dealing with it. But they should be addressed, because when you're given a chance to do that, you should do that. And if that is being negligently handled, when it goes back to the data protection board, that might be taken seriously. So that's one challenge that companies might face, to set up internal mechanisms or departments and personals to handle data. And the other challenge is going to be earlier, when we had the information security, information technology, sensitive personal data rules, there were larger amount of obligations for sensitive personal data and personal data in general, which can even mean my phone number and my name just as such. And in such cases now, earlier, sensitive personal data had different obligations and personal data had different obligations. Few other global acts like GDPR also say act in the same manner. But in this law, in the current law, there's just a definition of personal data, and all obligations are on personal data. So even names, phone numbers should be protected in the same way our biometric should be protected. Meaning there shouldn't be no leak of information, and it should be only processed by authorized persons, and all the other obligations apply to all data on a very similar manner. For us to, again, going back to my first point, to understand this and implement this is going to be the main challenge. And the third challenge is that currently we just have the act. The rules are yet to come. So the act, to give you an example, the act says that we'll have to notify the board, the data protection board, and the individuals in case of a data leak or a data breach. But what timeline should we notify it in? What is the manner in which such notification has to be provided? All these procedural aspect has to come out in the rules, and only then companies will know to what has to be done. So now we are setting up the foundation, and there is an entire building that has to come up after. So that can be, I can say, that's a little, that's not a challenge per se, but there is another aspect that companies should be aware of.
Fantastic. So I have a couple of follow-up questions on this, but there are lots of places where I won't name the companies. My data is already with them. Okay, so how do I prepare for normally the what I've read is sometimes these laws actually help the big firms and not the small firms, right? Because the small firms don't have the budget to manage this kind of complex systems that they need to put in place. So do you believe as a as professionals that it is protecting the what I call as the data police, or like a monopoly, I call them data police, right? So, or does it, really help the MSMEs or the small companies? Because the small companies, as Bharat said, I can't afford 15, 20 lakhs to do these kinds of things. So where do you think this is going to hit? Because to me, that is going to be the biggest challenge that I see. I'm now talking some general things, but it's important for us to understand that how it will impact at the at the grassroots level, right?
So, Swami, let me again go back in history, right? If you were the same MSME 10 years back, 15 years back, when we didn't have digital information,
Hmm.
we used to have something called yellow pages. And they were like fat, big books. And there were companies, I mean, that was a brand of Get It. I mean, Get It will be a company which will collect information. There will be telephone directories. And you know how traditional marketing used to be done. You will take the address from telephone directories and send mass mailers. and they were a phenomenal company called Otto Burlington. I do not know whether you
Correct.
remember them.
Of
They
course.
will, yeah, they won't send you the products, but they will only send you a pamphlet,
Correct.
right? Yeah, and then you use the same pamphlet. You will tick what you want. You mail them back, which is prepaid,
Mm.
and then they will send you the products if you send the money. And cash on delivery used to be there through the post. So they did survive. So marketing was always there before the digital era. If you want faster communication, if you want to use data to make yourself relevant, of course, the larger company will have deeper budgets, larger teams, geographical spread, which will make them embrace law faster. But once a law has come, there is no turning back and saying, I'm small, I'm medium, I'm micro. It's unfair. It doesn't work that way. If you want to use a third party's data, I mean, it's not that generic data cannot be used. It's personal data which you cannot use. So let's understand that. So you can outsource this to a person and say, I do not know what to do. I want to. So it's going to be targeted. So half an hour back, I was mentioning how you will not be hitting in unknown targets. Earlier on, I think data protection is going to be making life easier,
Mm.
and your marketing budgets must much lesser. So you know who is willing, who is consented, who is open to receiving your information, rather than spending unknown amount of money to unknown persons, whether they are consented, interested or not, and still making one or two large social media companies take all your money for every click they take money from you. We know who we are speaking about,
Yeah.
right? Instead, if the three of us are instead talking about or interested in data protection information, and there is a company selling a book on data protection, and the company will go out and say, please find out five persons from Bombay and Chennai who are interested in buying books and who have consented for us to be targeted. Then that mail will be sent only to consented, targeted five individuals rather than 5,000 individuals who are uninterested. So I think it is not going to be, initially, to understand it would be difficult. uh, at the end of the day, a person who is selling nariyal pani coconut at the end of our road, who's got a GPay or a Google Pay or a UPI, he understands how it works. It will be simplified. It
Great.
will be simplified, and there's going to be a leapfrog in privacy embracement in India, and it will be, and there would be disruptors who will come and simplify it for us. That's going to change India into a 5.0 country, where I think that is the next level of growth, where unwanted spend and splurge on marketing will be behind us. That's my take on it. Only time will say what it is. Madhura, you have anything to add on how the small ones would be able to comply?
That's first to say that was a wonderful way of putting it, because most companies fear that it's going to affect their marketing and affect their business, but it's actually a blessing in disguise, if I can say it that, put it that way. So, and speaking of how it's going to affect or impact smaller businesses, we should appreciate how this law has been structured in a manner that's very simple. So if we look at, if when we were speaking of GDPR, if we look at GDPR, the requirements under GDPR is not as simple as the law is. So even the government has taken the efforts to understand the law, how it's going to, because India is a large population, and with a different large population, not just in terms of persons, but also in terms of businesses and smaller businesses. So that is being very well taken into account in the drafting of the act, and it's put up in a manner that if we are doing things the way it is expected to be done, we are halfway compliant with the act.
Fantastic. So, on that note, Bharat, what would be your advice to companies? I think you really, you summarized it beautifully in the, in the earlier, thing that you were talking about, where what you said really is it's going to leapfrog the way we, the way we will look at data, the way we'll, I think time will say, but probably will leapfrog many economies, is what you were saying. So, what would be your advice to companies, saying what are the five or one or two steps that they need to take, and that way I think it'll just become a process that they need to follow. So what would be your advice?
First advice, let's not procrastinate it. Let's see what we have and where we have it and what do we do with it. And I say it's about data, it's about personal data. So it's time that we, as responsible citizens, law abiding companies, corporations, entities, we are sitting on someone else's valuable information. We are, it's like I'm taking your car and putting it at home, and I'm responsible for it. That's why it's called a fiduciary under the act. So if you are a fiduciary and I have something of yours which I am supposed to protect and process properly, I need to know what I have of yours and where have I kept it. It's like Swami has given me his property documents and said, I'm going out on a tour, please take care of it. I am a fiduciary. I am supposed to take care of it. I mean, I don't own it, but I need to take care of it. So I would possibly put it in a bank locker or my fireproof safe at home. I do something about it. When you come back and ask after the trip, I need to retrieve it and give it to you and not give it off to a third person. So it's as simple as that. So to start with, we need to look into our own cupboards and see what data we have, what part of that data is personal to someone. Do I have a digital copy of such personal data? Where do I save it? How do I save it? Where do I use it? What purpose? Most importantly, do I have a consent from that person to use the data I use it for? If these four or five elements, what, where, how, why, of the personal data of third parties, it's a start. It's a start to know what we are holding on so that we know what to do with it. So the first step would be an audit or a internal check introspection mechanism, and then to look at the law as to where do I fit in. Am I a fiduciary? Am I a processor? Am I a super fiduciary? What is the word?
Significant data.
Significant data fiduciary, so on and so forth. So let's start by looking in our own drawers and cupboards what data we have, and then call out or find out which slot of the statute we fit in.
Thanks. On that note, Bharat, it was a lovely conversation, extremely enriching in terms of how this act has been configured, done. Thanks, Madhu, for some brilliant explanation on the components. Very, very clear direction that you gave in terms of the need for data mapping exercise. And Bharat, thanks for your explanation on making it simple and easy for business to take the first step. Thanks a lot. Lovely talking to both of you.
Absolute pleasure and honor joining you.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah,
It was wonderful experience for us as well to discuss on all of these aspects. And now, before we conclude, I just want to recall the fact that 2 years ago, when a very famous instant messaging tool that all of us use changed its privacy policy, and India was worried there was a litigation as well, because that is going to mean that the instant messaging tool that we on an everyday basis use is going to process the data for purposes that we might not have authorized to do. And when India understood that there was a law in this, the policy that was applicable in India was not the same policy that was applicable in EU, because EU had a law protecting its people's personal data, but India didn't have a law. But now today we have one, and this is a great leap towards how we take our stance when it comes to personal data as a nation. That's
Fantastic.
my
Thanks, Madhu. On that note, thanks a ton for your time, and thanks for really enlightening us on what's going to come and how businesses and, of course, we as consumers and customers need to be prepared for this law. Thanks a lot.